Sometimes things are going horribly wrong in the opening, but you can still try to fight back. A comeback in chess is not uncommon, but you have to really have faith in yourself and look for your own opportunities. I'm going to show you a very interesting game played back in 1897 in St. Petersburg, a game between Emanuel Schiffers and Mikhail Chigorin. And this game is absolutely amazing because it's a short game, but a lot of things are happening. So let's get ready for the action. It starts with the move 1 e4, e5, knight f3. And now the pawn on e5 is under threat and you should try to defend the pawn or go for counterattack. So knight c6 is the main move. You can play knight f6 to attack the pawn on e4. It's the better of defense. But definitely this move, f7, f6, should not be played. Never play f6 is a well-known chess saying, as it really weakens the black king. And now the key move is to strike here with the move knight takes e5. This is a sacrifice. Nowadays it's very well known that the knight cannot really be taken because of f takes e5. There is queen h5 check. And now black has a big problem because if you go g6, then there is queen takes e5. And white is going to win back the material with the rook on h8 is hanging. While in case the king moves up to e7, then things are going really bad for black. As after queen takes e5, the king got to go to f7. Bishop comes out to c4 with check. And if you try to run away now with the king, queen f5, king h6, you push the pawn to d4, discover check with the bishop. And after g5, well, the move h4 with tremendous pressure against the pawn on g5. This is absolutely crushing. Game over. So after knight takes e5, there's not much you can do. But the move queen e7 is the only way to keep fighting here. When you're attacking that knight on e5, that's a very important resource. And, well, if you would play queen h5 now, then g6 is a good defense. When both the queen on h5 and the knight on e5 are hanging. If you do take on g6, saying that after h takes, the rook on h8 is hanging, well, there is queen takes e4 with check. And after solving the check, the knight on g6 can be taken. So white actually is a pawn up, but will have to give it back right away. After knight f3, black can take the pawn on e4, but then the game continues. The queen is not that well placed in the middle of the board. But black played here the move d5. The pawn on e4 is pinned, cannot take on d5. So d3 played, d takes e4, white recaptures, queen takes e4, materials even. And now black is giving a check. What is white gonna do? You can solve the check by blocking with your queen, but that's not how you try to take advantage of an early queen sortie of the opponent. So better is here the move bishop e2, blocking the check with that bishop. Knight c6, and now white's castling. Very good move, because white is about to go rook e1, move the bishop away, and attack the queen and the king in the middle of the board. So that's the main problem of black's strategy. Black tried here to play the move bishop d7, and after knight c3, the queen is under attack, and where should the queen go to? Difficult to say, there are various possibilities. In the game there followed queen g6, and I think that's a very unfortunate square for the queen to go to. Maybe queen e6 would have been a better idea, and then try to castle queenside as quickly as possible. Bring your king into safety. But after queen g6, once again we see the main problem of having played that move f6, as this diagonal is a big problem. And white has a beautiful strike here with the move knight e5. Attacking the queen. Also queen takes d7 is a big mating threat. So the knight got to be taken, but now it's bishop h5 and black is losing the queen. Normally this should just be game over and white should be able to convert it. But you have two options as black. Resign immediately or keep fighting. So black castled queenside. And after bishop takes g6, now black recaptured with the h-pawn. I think that's a good move. So you maintain that knight on e5 and you're opening up the h-file for your rook. So the rook is already joining play without having made a single move. And what should white do? Well, white played here the move queen e2, wanted to leave this file so there are no unpleasant discovered attacks on that queen. Now the bishop comes to d6. And whenever you're material up, guys, this is a very important lesson. Try to understand what your opponent is looking for. What is the last chance of your opponent? Well, with the bishop on d6 and the rook on this h-file, definitely the h2 square. That's the main weakness in white's position. So nowadays, strong players, they will play a move like bishop f4 without spending a lot of time. However, in the game, Schiffers played here the move knight to e4. He wanted to get rid of that bishop by attacking it with its knight, but he definitely overlooked this move. Knight f3 check. Splendid sacrifice with the point that it's a check. And if you take with the queen, it's bishop takes h2. Rook protects bishop, king h1, bishop g3. And white doesn't have anything better but just repeat the moves. So white, being a queen up, didn't want to settle for a draw. Played here g takes f3. Bishop takes h2. And now the difference is that the king still can go to g2 as the pawn is on f3. But black has another brilliant move. Bishop h3. Check. Attacking the king. And, well, if you take the bishop on h2, because it's unprotected now, black is going to move the bishop by taking the rook. And the rook on h8 is giving a check. After the king goes away, the queen can be captured and black is a full rook up. Therefore, after bishop h3, the only move is king h1. And this is a very interesting situation with two bishops on the h-file. They're obstructing the rook, but the white king is a bit in trouble. Doesn't have many squares to go to, but don't be too greedy. Don't take on f1, because after queen takes f1, the majority of your threats now is gone. You can still move the bishop, but you're not able to attack any other piece. So rather than taking the rook on f1, black moved the bishop to e5. So now bishop takes f1 is a serious threat here. King went to g1. And now bishop h2 back, because the bishop cannot be taken. King h1, bishop e5. And black is a queen down, but is about to force a repetition of moves. But what can you do about it? I mean, the rook is hanging. If the rook goes to g1, try to save the rook. Well, there is bishop f1 anyway. And the king can't go to the g2 square. It's a check. Can block with the bishop, but after rook takes h6 is checkmate. This is a problem. King g1 would still lead to that repetition I mentioned. But queen e1 was played in the game. So that after bishop takes f1, the queen is not under threat and you can play king g1. The game continues. It's a total mess. But instead, Chigorin had a different idea. Played here bishop g4. Check. So the king is in trouble. If the king has two options. If it goes to g2, then it's rook h2 with check. After king to g1, it's bishop takes f3, and there's nothing really you can do against the mating threat of rook to h1. After knight g3, you give a check on g2, king h1. You first eliminated knight, very important defender as it's a discovered check. King goes to h2, now rook g2, double check. And after king h3, it's rook h2 with checkmate. Beautiful mating pattern with a rook and two bishops. Let's go back to the game. Instead of playing king g2, king g1 was played, but now it's bishop takes f3 anyway. Setting up the mating threat on h1 with the rook, knight g3, only move to defend the h1 square. Now, of course, after bishop takes knight, pawn recaptures, the king can just escape. So this is not leading anywhere. You can't do that. But look at this bishop. It's a really strong piece. And black played here this move, knight to e7. Excellent idea to bring another piece into the game. It's very difficult to get rid of that bishop. If black were to play, he would probably go for knight f5 and try to eliminate that knight on g3, after which mate is very close. White played queen e3 to attack the bishop, and now the bishop just went back to c6. It's very important that white is unable to move its f-pawn. If you play f4 to attack the bishop comes into d4, pinning that queen on e3. And black regains the material with a devastating attack. Instead, white played here the move queen takes a7, grabbing a pawn, believing that, Okay, you're having some counterattack, queen a8. If the king goes away, the rook can come over to give a check on the d-file. Looks very dangerous, but this is your moment, guys. Whenever you're under pressure, don't automatically react to your opponent's threat. That's what Chigorin did. He played here the move b6 so that the bishop prevents the queen from coming to a8. But instead, there was an amazing resource here for black, and I give you a few more seconds to find it. If you want a bit more time for yourself, pause the video and of course subscribe to the channel. And then 3, 2, 1. The best move here for black is rook h1. It's a brilliant rook sacrifice. And after taking it with your knight, it's the only move. You follow it up with another sacrifice. You're sacrificing the bishop. King h2. And now the rook comes to h8. If you go king to g1, now it's the rook coming into h1, capturing the knight, which is, of course, the mating pattern with rook and bishop again. If the king goes to g3, then it's knight f5 check. So this was the reason why it was so important to get a knight involved. The knight is giving a check, but also the other rook joined the attack in this manner. After king to f4, it's rook h4 with a beautiful checkmating pattern as the knight covers the e3 and g3 square. The bishop covers f3, and the king is also not able to move because of that pawn on f6. All the pieces are in the attack. Pawn on g6 even supports that knight on f5. It was not played in the game, unfortunately, but can you imagine starting the game with a huge blunder and then being forced to give up your queen and then be able to win in such a way? That would have been absolutely amazing. In fact, the game continued with b6, and now after bishop e3, the very same idea with rook h1 would still have been possible also now, so that after sacrificing the rook and the bishop, the rook comes in, knight f5, king f4, rook h4. It's exactly the same mating pattern. Chigorin didn't find it. Played here the move knight f5, just hoping that white is tempted to take that knight, because that allows, for instance, bishop h2 with checkmate. Beautiful mating pattern. Of course, also rook h1 was also fine. But after knight f5, white played the move f4, trying to force matters, try to eliminate attacking pieces. Knight takes g3 was played. Maybe knight takes e3 would also have been a nice move, getting rid of that annoying bishop. And after f takes e5, don't take the rook on f1 because of queen a6, and the knight on f1 will be taken next. But apparently there's a brilliant idea here with a move rook to h3 with a lot of counterplay. Apparently it's a total mess. Didn't happen. Knight takes g3 was on the board. And after f takes e5, rook h1 played. King has to go to f2. Rook h2, check. Very important moment. The king cannot go back to g1 because of rook g2. And if the king goes back to e1, it's rook e2 with checkmate. So the only move is to capture the knight. Now the other rook comes over to h8. This is very important. Queen a6 was played. King b8. What's happening here? If you are careless, play a move like rook 81, bringing your remaining piece into the game. It's rook g2 check, king f4, rook h4 with checkmate. Beautiful mating pattern, beautiful cooperation of black's remaining pieces on the board. But instead, Schiffers played bishop takes b6. The idea is that you're trying to open up the king, but also the white king, after it's being hunted, can try to run away via the dark squares. So that's why the bishop wanted to move away. Rook g2 played, king f4 only move, rook h4 check, king e3, rook h3 check. King doesn't have that many squares to go to, only two options. After the move king f4, black went back to with a rook to h4, and the players agreed to a draw. But it should be said that if you play here the move king to d4, apparently white is just winning. Let me show you why. If you give a check, the white king is running away, and you're able to block with your queen on d3. This is, of course, an important defensive technique. Once your material up, you're able to give back something. After rook takes, king takes, c takes b6, pawn takes f6. This endgame should be winning with an extra exchange. Of course, it still requires some effort by white. But still, it should have been tried. After king d4, rook h4 doesn't work. If you play rook d2, don't run away with your king. So of course very tempting to stick to the material, but after rook takes c2, king b4, rook takes b2, you can go back with your king, but that's leading to a repetition of moves. If you go too far, then all of a sudden black is giving a checkmate with the two rooks at the side of the board. That's a beautiful mating pattern once again. Instead, here again, the critical continuation would have been queen to d3, giving back the material, and after take, c takes b6. Once again, the pawn on f6 can be taken, and white should be able to convert his material plus. But I thought this was a very interesting game. This is something you will rarely see at the very top these days. Could have been a very spectacular game at your own chess club or in one of your online games. You could have played such a brilliancy. I like this game. Let me know your thoughts about this famous classic, which I consider to be one of the greatest comebacks ever in chess, even though black forgot to finish off the game. Let me know what you think, if you have any other candidates for the best comeback ever, and I'm glad to cover it on the channel as well.